And we are live.
We are live. So we're not going to talk about this today, but is the PlayStation 5 really that big? And if so, is that a problem? Have you seen those pictures?
I haven't seen like actual dimensions for it, but it looks pretty chonky.
It looks like my mid tower.
It's hefty, but I will say, as someone who's owned consoles my whole life, I've never moved them around. I buy it, I set it next to my TV.
The original Xbox was pretty fat too, so
that's a big hunger.
Yeah. Well, the original Xbox's original controller was really
was a whole nother level. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the real prize of the collection.
I miss it in a weird way.
I don't. My hands would be sore after trying to reach all over that thing.
Yeah, I didn't. The tiny hands can't handle that. No pun intended.
That's what it is. I got these long ass guitar player fingers that those Xbox controllers are like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
All right, this is gonna be a fun one. So let's do the thing.
Is it gonna be fun?
Yeah.
Hopefully it will be entertaining.
Of that I'm sure, but maybe more out of anger than excitement.
Yeah. Well, let's get right into it then. Welcome in to the DNVR Gaming Podcast, presented by WGT Golf, the most beloved and popular free golf game in the world. You can download it right now at dnvrgolf.com. You can play closest to the hole or full stroke play at world famous courses. You can get waxed, or you can wax just about anybody here on the DNVR staff or in the DNVR community. We keep having to expand the country club because so many of you out there are having fun with it the way we're having fun with it. It's been really cool to see the way the community has rallied behind this thing, the way there's basically now a sub-community of DNVR WGT golfers who are always talking to each other about the games they're playing and setting up matches. It's a whole lot of fun. I've been enjoying it. I know that Rudo and AJ have been enjoying it, but none of us have mastered this thing yet. I'll tell you that much.
You don't have to be good to enjoy it, for sure.
Yeah.
The three of us are ironclad proof that you don't have to enjoy it to be good. Let's hop right into our main topic of conversation today because it's a big one. It's been an ongoing one through the video game industry and then the other industries that we're going to discuss for a long time. It is the checkered past of adapting video games into other media, primarily movies and television. There have been some I guess cartoons would fall under the realm of television. There have been novel adaptations over the years. We probably won't spend too much time talking about those unless it comes up and someone has something to say. But for the most part, it is like, we're not going to be talking video game books, dude.
Yeah. Hard pass. I have no thoughts.
I have thoughts, but only related to movies. So we'll get into that.
Right. And so I think, a good place to begin is with the obvious concession that the vast majority of video game related media that are not themselves video games have failed on both a creative and commercial level. That most of them are quite bad. And since that's the case, why don't we start there? And why don't the two of you give me both just sort of your most egregious, Rudo, I'll start with you on this one, offenders over the years off the top of your head. Just you go, man, that video game movie it's doing a disservice to the video game industry, or this is just flat bad, whatever it may be. What stands out most to you?
Well, I hate to go back to the well on this one and say the recent World of Warcraft movie was absolutely terrible. But I'll even expand it beyond this movie and say that any game franchise with a significant amount of story involved and lore behind it, if you're going to make a movie of it, it needs to be canon. You can't just make shit up and change the rules and do whatever you want and change the whole story of the game and expect people to like it. Like, you might as well not have even called that movie the World of Warcraft movie. You've just been like, here's some orcs, here's some humans, they fight, and then they make up. Like, come on.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think that will develop as we go throughout here. We see there's a number of different ways people have tried to do this. And I actually think there's a lot of comparisons to the comic book industry and how, I often refer to the 90s as the era when people made comic book movies that had nothing to do with comic books and were not at all, related to those characters. And I think video games are still going through that phase, and World of Warcraft is a pretty egregious example. Yeah. Unfortunate, egregious example. AJ, what did you think of that one, and what are some of your did you guys actually see the movie, by the way? Just
the WoW
Warcraft?
Yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
I would assume because you're gonna see it because it's the original property is so close to your heart, so you've got to at least check it out.
They have you by the soft bits for sure, because you have to go see it to make sure it's bad. But
so I did not see it until I started dating Z, and she's huge World of Warcraft fan, and so it was like she agreed to watch the Marvel movies with me because she had never seen any of them, and
that was the trade-off.
I agreed to watch Warcraft, and obviously I'm 20 movies in debt here, but I think Warcraft counts for multiple movies because dude, that movie bad. I was literally talking to her about it this morning. Like, that movie was bad. Like, it was so terrible. And it's funny because it had that reputation when I went and saw it. When we sat down to watch it together, I was like, oh, I'm expecting this to be really bad. And it ended up being maybe just a touch better than I was expecting because Warcraft fans hated it so much that I was like, this is going to be the worst movie I've ever seen. And so I was expecting a Mario level catastrophe. Right. And I don't think it's far off, honestly, but I liked it. I mean, there were things about it that I enjoyed, but I'm also not super familiar with Warcraft lore. So,
okay. And I was going to kind of ask a question sort of related to that. So maybe Rudo can jump in here too. But while we're on our favorite series here, Final Fantasy has an odd relationship with this as well. The first movie ever produced with the Final Fantasy name on it, very famously, The Spirits Within, had very little to do with Final Fantasy. And when it's kind of been an agreed upon consensus over the years that most of the problems people had with that movie were that it just, why is this called Final Fantasy? What is it? There's no chocobos and moogles or any of this other stuff. But if you remove all of that, and if it had literally just been called The Spirits Within, and people didn't know it was supposed to have anything to do with the video games, like, it's a decent sci-fi movie that, on its own, is in no way bad. So if I watched Warcraft and had no idea it was supposed to be based on anything, would I still be laughing at the writing and acting and the plot and all of that stuff?
Probably.
Yeah, it's bad, dude.
It was baseline bad, and then I can't speak to the Final Fantasy games. Well, I guess let me ask you this. Could the Final Fantasy movie be considered canon, in its own little, was it just some own little area of the world where maybe they just didn't have chocobos or whatever?
One of the nice things about that series is you can count a lot of stuff as canon because of how often they reboot and how many different things. I actually think the parallels are pretty clear. So I would argue yes, but I would say that most of the fan base would say no, there's not enough stuff in there.
Okay, because that was part of the failure of the Warcraft movie is they basically took a main storyline of the games and changed it significantly. And the creators of the games had to come out and say, yeah, we're not counting this movie as part of the actual story at all.
Right.
And it's
that's so
Blizzard comes out and is like,
We tried, but this ain't it.
Yeah. No, the Spirits Within went a completely different direction, and it's just not related to anything.
Yeah,
so it's its own side story that you
I
can
think
take it or leave it. Right.
Way more acceptable than changing inherent things that have been part of the franchise.
Right. Taking established lore and characters and rearranging them for a Hollywood thing. Ooh, that's the Dungeons and Dragons movie that I went to the theater to see when I was like 12 or whatever did that. And it's just like, why? Who asked you to do that?
This story is already written. You don't have to change it.
Right. That was the point in the first place. It is interesting. AJ mentioned the Super Mario's movie, one of the more famous examples of it. And on the Wikipedia page that I'm on, the research that's gone into this pod, of the list of all the films based on video games, it starts there. That's the very first one. Like, you would think maybe there's like a handful of things before that, but that's the one on this list, at least. Like, the history of video game movies starts with this adaptation of Super Mario Brothers that had nothing to do with Super Mario Brothers or a Mushroom Kingdom or any of this. Like, it's just a couple of Italian guys going to a weird alternate dimension where Dennis Hopper's being kind of weird and creepy.
It's a good way to put it. Where Dennis Hopper is being inexplicably bizarre.
Yeah.
And you just don't understand what's going on. None of it really gets explained. And it's just like this super random, like, mishmash of stuff from the Mario games where you're just like, okay, like, they're like these Italian dudes and they're plumbers, and like now these are like the dinosaur dudes, I guess. And
can someone explain the obsession to me of taking video games and making them into real life acted movies? Why not? Like, it seems like it would be built for an animated franchise of some kind or something. I'm sure you could even, like, for modern games that look better, you could probably hit up the studios and be like, hey, send us your 3D models and we'll just use those.
Right. Like, I think there are talks about like a Kingdom Hearts series on Disney Plus or whatever. And like, that makes the most sense in the world because that's basically what that already is.
Yeah.
Those are just animated Disney Pixar movies that are now it can be a show, but didn't mean to cut you off there, AJ.
Well, the next Mario movie is supposed to be animated for the record.
Like, why have we taken so long to get here? Why have we had to have movie after movie of like best half CGI'd?
A lot of the movie adaptations that we've gotten have been like Mario was one where it's like, okay, how are you going to make a movie into this, right? But it's not hard to see where they could look at Resident Evil or Tomb Raider or any of the fighting movies, the Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and Double Dragon, I guess, where you're like,
those are actually the next three on the list, by the way. You just nailed it. After Super Mario Bros. Comes Double Dragon, then Street Fighter, then Mortal Kombat, in that order.
Okay. But like those, it's easy to be like, okay, well, you just get people to play these characters because these characters in the games were played by people, like just regular people that could do stuff. And so I think those adaptations, Silent Hill, they did multiple Silent Hills. They did the Hitman movies, like Hitman, like the Hitman movies weren't even like, oh my God, these are so bad. Like they were bad for, in relation to movies,
right?
Like good movies, but in terms of video game movies, the Hitman movies were pretty acceptable. Yeah. Like a lot of these are really easy, like Need for Speed. You just drop a dude into a fast car and you have him go do stuff,
right?
And like I think that's pretty. I think to your point on that, like that's easy. Like Warcraft, you could have easily just been like, hey, maybe, because the cinematics in WoW are awesome.
Yeah.
So maybe just string together 90 minutes of awesome
exactly.
cinematics.
It's a 90-minute cinematic is exactly what it should have been.
And just make like in that world, I'm down with just making that one an animated movie.
Yeah.
But like you see, a lot of the adaptations are just okay. We're going to take people and we're going to put people into the movie.
The franchise that's done both successfully, maybe the only one. I can't claim that because I can't claim, encyclopedic knowledge. Halo. Halo has released live action standalone flicks that are, I would argue, at the very least, decent, if not pretty good. And again, they sort of do that thing where they're in the Halo universe tertiarily, so they don't have to mess anything up too much. And then that collection of animated shorts that's very much like the Animatrix in the Halo universe is extraordinary. So yeah, I think there's valid ways to do both, and within those two ways, they show you like the ones that are live action. They're on the ground, they're more militaristic, they're less based in all the aliens and space stuff. They're more personal stories told about soldiers caught up in the conflict, and then the animated stuff is big and bombastic and does all of the cool epic sci-fi stuff. It's like it kind of shows you which two ways you can go with that.
I guess, yeah. For some of the movies that are successful, particularly the non-animated ones, I think are the ones that don't take themselves super seriously, like the Resident Evil series. In the grand scheme of movies, are they great movies? No. But if you want to watch Mila Jovovich go kill hundreds and hundreds of zombies, if this is the movie for you, like
some cool stuff with lasers.
Yeah, exactly. Like they don't have to try so hard to make it matter to people. It's a video game. People are either already going to know the story or have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. So on the other end of the time spectrum here, I think two movies that play an interesting role in this conversation that I thought were good, that were live action but relied heavily on CGI, were the Detective Pikachu flick and Sonic the Hedgehog. I was shocked by how not terrible Sonic the Hedgehog was, because it had so many of the markers we're talking about here, where like they kind of just invent a Sonic story to tell. It's loosely related to the games. They do the CGI thing on main characters. Even the early shots, right, were infamously terrible looking.
I with the Sonic one, I think the fan base almost single-handedly willed that into a decent movie, because they just would not stop yelling about it until they got it right.
Which, more often than not, I feel like that's yelling against the brick wall or just complaining to complain. But it seems to have worked in this case. And it's a funny, entertaining, completely non-offensive, fun use of an hour and a half. And I don't think there are nods to the deeper Sonic lore and stuff like that I'm like, it's probably about as good as you could have made this.
That's a great way to put it. That's the way, like, you can make references back to the original lore, but in a mostly contained story where you're like, yeah, we're calling back to this franchise's history, but also this is kind of in its own little bubble, to where Sonic can do whatever he wants and it doesn't affect the actual games too much.
Right. I want to talk. Go ahead, AJ.
I did really like Detective Pikachu. I thought it was cute.
Yeah, I barely even consider that a video game movie, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I forget sometimes even that Pokemon was a video game first, and it's not just this thing that's always been around that's just a ubiquitous part of our society.
Yeah, it's certainly, that's the franchise that has most consistently breached other forms of media and just hung around.
Yep.
Because I mean, the Pokemon TV show was like
massive.
Yeah, I mean, it was forever, and they've made multiple movies, and Detective Pikachu was actually like, it it's only related to Pokemon and that like Pokemon exist like in the world.
Exactly.
Right.
But like that's a good baseline for if you want to make a video game movie. Like you touch on the similar things, recognizable things, and then you just act like that's a totally normal thing in that universe. That like they're just Pokemon just freaking wandering around the streets, right? Like you're just like, oh, okay. Well, that's the universe they live in. So it's not like a, oh my God, look. You know, it's just a regular thing. But so don't make like a big deal out of it. Like be like, yeah, this is our universe. But explore that universe. Make it interesting in that, okay, yes, this is normal, but how do you make their normal interesting to us?
Right.
And I think that's the challenge that a lot of the adaptations have run into, where they spend so much time being like, oh my gosh, look at that. And they're like, they get caught up in trying to do fan service that they make a bad movie.
Yeah.
Right. Or they go completely the other way and don't care at all about the original material. It's like they get caught in that web one way or the other. I did want to talk about some interesting solutions, I think, to those problems moving forward in a couple of recent adaptations. But before we get away from some of the just bad or perceived as bad movies and some of the stuff in between, AJ, you mentioned some two fighting movies that are very near and dear to my heart in both Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat that are not, and I repeat, not good movies. But I do think that especially the original Mortal Kombat, they were entertaining, and they were the original Street Fighter is completely non-respectful of the source material whatsoever. It's just legitimately hilarious.
Was that one
is funny?
Was that Jean-Claude Van Damme?
Yeah. Like if you sort of step back and watch that movie just as like a campy beat 'em up 90s Hollywood action flick, like the writing in it is actually pretty good. It's a funny movie, and I think that there's an argument to be made that for those kinds of movies, that was the direction they could have and should have taken. Sort of like what Rudo was saying earlier about Resident Evil, is like it didn't take itself too seriously. It had a whole lot of fun with it. They almost literally turn and wink at the camera a couple of times, and we're cool with it. Like it's chill, but the thing is, they changed all of the characters, and so that pissed everybody off, because that's what we like as video game fans, is our characters. And so the fact that they were funny, it's like Balrog and Zangief ain't supposed to be funny, bruh. Like, those are supposed to be big, scary dudes who kick your ass. So the fact that they were funny is incongruous to what we're coming to you for.
I don't know, man. Zangief was pretty funny on Wreck-It Ralph.
Right. Well, and now Zangief is funny. Like that's almost a tribute to that original Street Fighter movie. You know, the best line in the movie is when they're driving in all the weaponry and they're gonna blow up the bad guy's base, and they're watching it on channel, and Zangief yells, "Quick, change the channel." That's legitimately funny.
Maybe I just can't speak to this with the Mortal Kombat movie because I didn't watch it until long after it came out, and
so bad.
A lot of those 90s movies just did not hold up at all.
Well, and they
feel very 90s when you go back and watch them now.
Exactly.
You're like, oh, this does not look good.
The Mortal Kombat movie, based on this list, is it was the first one to try to take the lore of the game and the premise of the game and turn it into a movie.
Yeah, you have to like fight your way up
between mortals and immortals. That's what we're doing here, and that's what that movie is. Is it good? Again, no, but it's the first time somebody went, I'm not just going to take this property and do whatever I want with it. I'm going to try to make it into a movie. They failed, and I still think they can do a much better job with some Mortal Kombat out there. But I like that, Liu Kang was a martial artist who had this relationship. Like all the stuff was the same. Scorpion was the dead skeleton guy, fiery demon, and Sub-Zero was his nemesis. Like, they kept all of that stuff in there. They just didn't execute it. Shang Tsung's out there stealing dudes' souls. Like, everyone looked how they were supposed to look and did what they were supposed to do. It didn't land yet.
I mean, this is going to be pretty hypocritical of me, but compared to other games, how many players are playing fighting games for the story?
I mean, I think for the most part they don't, but I do think that Mortal Kombat kind of always went out of its way from the beginning to try to separate itself there. And I don't know how successful they've been at that. Depends on who you ask.
Sure.
And you guys don't seem to be that into it. I think that Mortal Kombat, less than story, does have very compelling lore and characters. Plot, no. I think that the characters and sort of their basic premise and the premise of the world and stuff. And actually, the story in Mortal Kombat X, or 10, I don't even, because now it's 10, because now we're on 11, or I don't even know what the hell they're doing there. Not the biggest fan of the franchise in the world, but I did think that the last one had a pretty darn good story, and critics seem to generally agree. But I mean, I think you're right. You're not typically playing fighting games for the story. And there's also some decent fighting sequences in Mortal Kombat 1. The biggest problem is where they tried to stick in super dated CGI, which totally ruins them.
Yeah.
But, oh yeah, and Ouroboros, good point. The Injustice series. Those are actually super dope. In fact, the story from those Injustice games has been so popular, they've turned them into comic books. They've gone the other way around. The adaptation, the story of the Injustice universe in DC is now canon, or a type of whatever alternate universes are canon. We're getting deep into the weeds there. But yeah.
When you get into superhero canon, you can
yeah,
go down some rabbit holes.
Yeah. All right. Were there any other ones that before we get into the future and two other things that I want to talk about? Max Payne, Prince of Persia.
Max Payne was stupid because
it was so dumb.
The whole point, like the whole appeal of Max Payne as a game was like bullet time.
Yep. Slow.
And it was like,
be a badass.
Like, guys, we
Matrixed already.
Exactly. Like the Matrix came out a long time ago. We don't need this. This is not interesting.
We briefly mentioned them. The Tomb Raider movies, I feel like, have largely been okay. I haven't seen the newest one.
They should have been way better because it's like, how hard is it to
make the game
fun treasure hunting movie?
Right.
Just like even Indiana Jones 4 had elements of it that were fun and interesting until it turned into this weird, like, aliens are here and are controlling us, and now the pyramid is lifting off and flying away. What the hell is going on? But, like, treasure hunting movies are very, very easy to make fun and interesting.
Yeah.
And somehow Tomb Raider is, like, blah. Like, it's just so meh across the board. Like, I'll watch National Treasure over and over and over and over, but Tomb Raider would come on and I would be like, I'm good.
Gorga letting us know that Injustice is free on Steam, Xbox Live, and PSN at the moment.
Those are really good games, by the way.
They are.
I don't play a lot of fighters anymore, but I really did like those. They were my style. They were my feel of fighter.
Yeah, I guess before we move on, I would just like to give a shout out to not just movies, but maybe the worst animated video game series ever in Legend of Zelda.
Oh, yeah.
Which, again, a little bit before my time, really. So maybe I didn't appreciate it for when it came out, but my goodness, when I went back and watched it, that was a disaster.
It's like the Star Wars Christmas stuff. Like maybe there were some people at the time who were like, this is a wholesome Star Wars thing. We're going to watch with the kids. But what in the hell? Who 2 great
Kind
movies.
of went going the opposite way. Castlevania on Netflix is
right. So
awesome.
So this is the direction I think I was going to take the conversation. Did anybody see Assassin's Creed? That was the only other thing.
I did not.
I didn't see the Assassin's Creed movie. I heard it was bad.
Yeah.
I bet he assassinates some people.
So spoilers, man. Spoilers. But I think that Castlevania and The Witcher are a perfect example of something that I've had a feeling about, but hasn't really been proved until those 2 shows, which is that video games, especially the big epic ones with great story. This has always been the problem.
Yeah.
If you've got a great story in a video game, it probably took you 40 or 50 or 60 hours to tell. If it's World of Warcraft, it might have taken you 10 years. And so trying to boil it down to an hour and a half long movie just doesn't feel right. But now we've got Hulu and Netflix and a billion other things, and everything is a 10-episode season. And I feel like video games are going to fit so much better into this format, whether you're doing it animated or through live action, that
100%.
episodic is the way to go here.
As relating to The Witcher, as a person who severely dislikes time skips in video games, they present a fantastic opportunity to tell stories about the characters in that world. In situations like this, where you can say, all right, well, you played through this, and all throughout the game they're talking about, here's this time skip that you missed, and then all of a sudden you fill in the blank of that time skip with a series of video movie season of whatever you want to call it. And everything, it brings the rest of the story together. Hard to do, because if you get it wrong, it's going to ruin everything. But it's easier to do in a vacuum like that, in a time skip where there's some references to it, but not a whole lot of things that are concrete.
Right.
I like the opportunities that shows present, because you can tell, you can focus more on character development, and you can really tell the stories of how things get built and what makes those universes interesting. Like, I think about the idea of a Mass Effect movie or a Mass Effect TV series, and it's like, of course I want a TV series.
Right.
Because I would love to spend 2 episodes with Garrus doing whatever.
Yeah.
You know, or Talia, you know, with the flotilla and checking out Quarian life and getting into the different things, right? Like so many of the different stories that can be told that in a movie you have to just sort of mention or gloss over or whatever, throw as an Easter egg somewhere. It really is the advantage of trying to translate games into cinematic experienses.
Right.
You throw them into a TV series, you have time. You might have multiple seasons. You know, you have multiple episodes, so you'll have more than an hour and a half, 2 hours tops to tell all the stories that you want.
Yeah, I think that, you know, say what you will about the way that it ended. Game of Thrones did us a huge service here by being this like counter example to like, well, I want to tell a big fantasy epic like a Warcraft or a Final Fantasy game, but you can't do that in live action, or you can't do it on television. It's like, you clearly can. You know, and if you've already got an ending that's well written, then you don't have to worry about what plagued
the issues there.
Right? If you're looking at it from a production standpoint, it's like, I don't know, can we put on television a scene where a giant army fights a dragon and have it be believable? Yep, you can. We know this is doable. There's a lot of those kinds of things that franchise proved out, and so I think that's going to help. But I also think similarly, the MCU has changed the cinematic game a little bit, because you could, if you wanted to, do episodic content in film and try to blow it out that way. Do either of you think that that's doable, possible, or that there's a video game franchise that might work better that way as sort of a film franchise akin to the MCU as opposed to a episodic television show.
I mean,
It depends on stories you want to tell.
Yeah, exactly. And I certainly believe it's possible, but it would be a lot easier to do in a TV series type of style, because look at how many years it took to build the MCU franchise as it is.
Well, and the downside of the MCU was the fatigue that it caused by the end.
Yeah.
It just took them, it probably took them 3 or 4 years too many to get where they needed to go. And like making those types of movies takes time.
Right.
It takes a lot of money. And if you were just going to use Mass Effect for this, because it's already on my mind about this, if you were going to try and do that, you know, you would have to have kind of an MCU style where this is the Garrus movie. You know, this is you know, the first movie introduces Shepard and you know, the commander, and you're rolling around and doing all your stuff, right? But if you wanted to make 5 of those movies and tell kind of the story of Mass Effect 1 or I guess 1 through 3, whatever, you would have to do it like how they did in the MCU, where each iteration sort of builds towards something, how they all come together. And you would have to have individual movies. You know, you'd have to have all the different characters. Instead of doing the side missions that explore that, those would be standalone movies.
Yeah.
It's first of all, spoilers here. If you don't know this yet, I think it's your own fault. But the reason Iron Man dying was such a big deal is because you just spent 20 hours of film watching this dude and growing attached to him. And when you compare that to, oh, here's an hour and a half long movie, you spent 15 minutes with this dude and now we're killing him. I don't feel anything for that.
It can still be sad, but it won't feel the same as where you're like, this has literally been a 15-year journey watching this character grow and develop movie after movie after movie. Because you go back and you watch like the first Iron Man and you see what a jerk he is at the start of that and how selfish he is. And then you go through 2 and 3 where he develops as a character and he starts to ask the bigger questions. And he starts to look at the bigger picture and he becomes more unselfish and starts to think about, you know, the things that would lead him to make the decisions that he does in other movies. You know, you get into the Civil War and some of the decisions he makes in that movie, and all of that required those first couple of movies to happen. Right. If you were going to try and mash all that into one movie, you'd be like, wow, this character went through a lot.
Yeah.
Exactly, right. And I think that's one of the things that these epic games, you know, the most famous death in the history of Final Fantasy, one of the things that they do is they leave that character slot open for the rest of the game. That they leave an empty slot there for you that you can just never fill. And there's like all these scenes in the game where like she should be standing, and it's you have to live with it for 50 or 60 hours, and there's just no way to replicate that in an hour and a half long movie. So I think our movies, unless someone's got a really ambitious, well thought out like MCU style, but maybe a bit tighter than that plan, the movie adaptation should stick to the action stuff. The Uncharted is perfect for making a movie. They're making one. It's gonna be great. It makes all the sense in the world. Honestly, with the way that the way that media has developed, we went from a Halo movie makes all the sense to where's our Halo TV series?
Yep,
100%,
1000%.
Because it's become such a big universe. There are so many games to pull from. You don't even have to tell those stories in movie form. You can take these huge universes that are established and tell side stories.
Right.
You know, if there's one thing that Star Wars has actually done well, because its main movie line kind of sucks, is that its offshoot stuff is interesting.
Don't turn off the podcast, please.
So, like Rogue One was cool. Solo maybe didn't work very well, but everybody was at least interested to see it because it explored a character that people really liked. They want more of that huge universe.
Right. Mandalorian,
and then,
another perfect example.
Mandalorian, a great example of
Yeah.
this. And if one, it's an area that the games have also accomplished, because the games take this huge universe and they just start picking off different aspects of it.
Right.
And like, that's the great part. When you create a huge universe that people just want to spend time in, they will. Just give them the opportunity.
Having been one of the people that has read the Halo books, I think it's set up perfectly to do like what Star Wars has done with the extended universe of Star Wars books that, at least for a long time, were considered canon. Now we're in a weird area with Disney, but
some of those books are really good too.
But in current day, those books can be television series. They can be animated or live action or whatever, where you get to tell a random story, like AJ said, especially for these spacefaring video games where you have the entire universe to play with. It's so easy to just make whatever story you want and throw it in there.
Right. So the rumors are going around. In fact, I think this has been greenlit, but hasn't been worked on. So who knows whether or not it will ever see the light of day. But that there is going to be a live action Final Fantasy television show. And of course, that fills me with all kinds of mixed emotions. And my first thought was, I hope they're retelling one of the games I love so much so that people who've never gotten to experience the games can get to experience one of those stories. And then I heard that it's going to be a completely original story set in the universe of the MMO. And my first thought was,
why?
Yeah.
Why? Why
you
would
have
you
an
do
MMO?
that?
Tell the story in that.
But here's where I think it becomes genius and actually checks off a lot of the boxes. Because at first I was like, no, you've got beloved characters already. Tell the story of, I know we're already remaking 7, but Cloud and Aerith, or tell the story of Terra and Locke and Celeste. Like, tell those stories there. And I still believe that, by the way. I would like to see those things. But the MMO, the Final Fantasy XIV, exists in a universe where almost all of it is canon and has happened or existed, and it's grown so big that it incorporates kind of the entire history of the series, and which I know sounds crazy and weird, but now the idea of like dropping an original cast of characters into what is essentially the Final Fantasy multiverse with the freedom and creativity to pull on whatever they want, but hopefully without messing it up, because they're telling original stories. Like, I'm curious. It's still not what I wanted. They're under no obligation to give me what I wanted, but I think that's a really interesting way to take this thing that we've been talking about, where it's like they don't want to risk messing up any of their beloved characters, so they're going to introduce new ones, but they're going to put them in a universe where all of those other characters are theoretically out there. Like,
I mean, just pull on what resources you already have from the series, right? We already have established that Square and the people who make Final Fantasy can make good stories. Use them to make a new good Final Fantasy story.
It could work if they can do it as a television show. And, their movies have been good, oftentimes criticized for not being, like I said, the first one wasn't Final Fantasy enough. The movie they made for Final Fantasy 15, the other movies they've made are either prequels or sequels to their video games, which makes them odd in this whole conversation. They're not standalone products, and they're not meant to be standalone. So it's just difficult to judge them. So this is just a whole new thing, telling a story over the course of a live action television series it's going to be very different for people who've only told stories through video games before and through movies that are directly related to those games. We'll see.
The one thing I will say is, no matter what, you're never going to please everyone. Like, there's always going to be people that are like the super hardcore double lore people that are like, here's the smallest, tiniest detail that you got wrong and it ruins everything. And
I have an uncle who will not watch comic book movies because none of them are exactly the same as the books he read growing up, and he just won't do it. It's the wrong Spider-Man. It's the wrong, what's his name? Wolverine's too tall. And I haven't gotten over it ever since.
He would have hated Civil War.
Yeah. This isn't
Civil War at all. This has nothing to do with Civil War. Where's the Fantastic Four?
A little bit.
Where's Reed Richards in the negative zone? What's going on here? None of Civil War took place. They basically just took the title of it and changed every single other aspect of it.
Yeah. I would have liked that movie more, literally, if it hadn't been called Civil War, which is dumb.
Yeah. I thought they did a great job of adapting to the universe that they had created to make an interesting Civil War, but it had nothing to do with it. Like, privacy was never a concern. The dude literally comes out and was like, I'm Iron Man in a press conference to start the entire thing. And it's like, well, privacy isn't going to be a problem here.
Right. No way to go back on that. But I do think, ironically, I want to finish on that point because the MCU obviously changed a lot of things. And you just talked about it, Civil War and a lot of this other stuff. But I think the biggest reason for its success compared to lots of comic book movies that came out in the 90s that weren't successful is that it was true to the soul, the heart and soul of the comic books that they were adapting. They got a lot of stuff directly in there. Whatever they couldn't do directly, a lot of times they would wink and nod to the people who knew. So they're like, yeah, we know this is different, but we're doing it this way now. But they really were respectful of the source material. And I think that's why comic book movies are successful now when they haven't been before. And that's still the biggest hurdle we've got to get over with the video game movies and adaptation, whether it's TV or movies, and that's what made Castlevania and The Witcher so good, and not where I've got to make an argument actually, if you take your goggles off, Spirits Within is a decent flick that aged well. No, Castlevania and The Witcher are just damn good television, regardless of who you are. And I don't think it's a coincidence that those are some of the most respectful of the source material. The number of Easter eggs in Castlevania is insane. They put music from the game into the show on multiple occasions. That's a level of respect I never expected to see in a video game adaptation. But they know it's a big part of the original franchise, and I think that's the key.
Here.
All right. Is that good to wrap it up there then?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's leave it at that. Appreciate everyone for hanging out. Let us know what I can talk. It's fine. I've podcasted before. What are some of your favorite television shows and movies based on video games, and what are some you're excited for coming up? We talked about a couple of them. I'm sure there are a few more on the horizon that we have no idea about. I've learned about the Sonic movie only when it became an internet meme. So let us know what you're looking forward to, or one you'd like to see. Write your own video game adaptation premise and send it to us. We'd love to hear about it. So make sure you're following the DNVR Gaming account. You're following us on Twitch. You're subscribed on YouTube. You've got WGT Golf downloaded on either your phone or your laptop over at dnvrgolf.com. And otherwise, you're just being cool, being chill, being safe, taking care of each other out there, playing some games. Be awesome. For Rudo and AJ, I've been Drew. Thanks for listening, and we see you next time.